thousands of different ethnic groups around the world, and again, this is Thomas Sowell, okay, if you read his books, has lists and lists of these. Practically every country in the world has multiple ethnic groups, most of which you've never heard of. Do you know in how many countries those ethnic groups get the exact same economic results? Zero. Zero. There is not one country on earth or one country in the history of the world that we know of where different ethnic groups have achieved the exact same level of economic success. It just doesn't work that way. Different people have different strengths and different weaknesses under different circumstances, different cultures, different genetics. You're going to get different results, and it's fine. It's okay. There is nothing wrong with people having to realize. One of the really blessed things about living in the United States in the 21st century is that nobody's starving. Economic differences matter way more if I'm starving to death and you got plenty of food. That's a problem. Okay, I'm really suffering over here. But that doesn't happen in the United States. We're way richer than that. If you are eating fancy French cuisine in a five-star restaurant every single night, and I'm eating, hot dogs and spaghetti, that's not such a big difference. I can live with that. Okay, I'm not eating as fancy as you, but I have enough food. I'm not starving. And the same thing on other levels. Maybe you're driving a Rolls Royce, and I'm driving an old beat-up jalopy. But I can get there as fast as you can. Speed limit's the same for me and you. Okay, so because we're as prosperous as we are, I actually think we should worry less about economic differences and appreciate the fact that we all have things to contribute. Which brings us to the affirmative action error, and this is what's in the mind of your typical leftist. White people have been bad for the last couple hundred years. And so, to make this right, the white folks need to be in the penalty box, for the next 100 or 200 years or something. Okay, and that'll kind of even things up. This is the two wrongs actually do make a right if you're a progressive concept. And it's very important to understand, first of all, how widespread it is. Yeah. This is gone way beyond just college admissions and hiring. This affirmative action disease has affected every single corner of our society, and I want to talk about that for a minute. I read a really interesting article by a guy who lives in Southern California, and he said something that really stuck in my mind. He said, I'm white. And being white in Southern California today is basically just one more ethnic group, one more minority group. There's no majority. Okay? There's Chinese people, there's black people, there's Mexican people, there's white people, just a whole bunch of different minority groups, no majority. He said, however, there is one difference. If the black people in my neighborhood want to get together and form the black citizens of Southern California, coalition, that's fine, no problem. If the Mexicans want to get together, if the Chinese want to get together, that's fine. If the white people want to do it, no. That's racist. Okay? You cannot do that. And I've got to tell you, I will not condemn I'm not even sure what they are, but the white nationalists until I can condemn the black nationalists. To say being a black nationalist, that's fine, we're proud of you, but be a white nationalist, oh my gosh. Now, I want to be very clear here. I think they're both really silly. I'd like us to forget all this nonsense and all get along with each other. But to say that the exact same thing is bad because of who's doing it, and this is very much the direction our country's going in, is hugely problematic. And I'm going to tell you why it's a disaster in a minute, if it's not already obvious. But I want to give you another example of it. I found this one particularly amusing. Was a recent Supreme Court decision which threw out the districting in North Carolina. You probably heard this, it got a lot of attention. They said that the Republican legislature had made racist districts and that they couldn't do that, and they threw it out. And it's interesting because the Supreme Court has generally said that districting is a political decision and you can do anything you want. You just can't be racist. So let me tell you real quick the history of this. This started back in the early 90s when the Democrats said, you know what, we want to have more blacks in Congress. So they were running up a whole bunch of state legislatures. They said, we're going to squeeze all the black people together into solidly black congressional districts because that will greatly increase the chance that they will elect a black representative to Congress. Okay? And that's what they did in the 90s. And it had two results. The first result was that there were more blacks in Congress. The second result was there were more Republicans in Congress. Why? Because if you squeeze all the blacks are overwhelmingly Democrat. If you squeeze all the blacks together, you make the surrounding districts whiter because you took all the blacks out to throw them into the spot, and they're whiter, therefore they're more likely to vote Republican. So it actually benefited the Republicans and the black Democrats and hurt the white Democrats. But the Democratic Party said that's okay. We'll take the hit on this one because it's so important to get more blacks in Congress, and the Republicans were like, cool, no problem. Okay? And then in North Carolina and other states too, because this is a real issue today, the Republicans took over, and you know what the Republicans did when this redistricting plan? Is they squeezed all the black people together into districts, which was the exact same thing the Democrats did. And it had the exact same result. It caused more blacks to get elected to Congress, and it caused more Republicans to get elected because by squeezing all the blacks together, you make their surrounding districts whiter. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that. It's racist. But it's the exact, I mean, there is no cosmic difference here at all. It's the exact same thing the Democrats did. But when the Democrats did it, they did it because they're woke and conscious and good, and when the Republicans did the exact same thing, they're bad racist Republicans. I'm not kidding you, that's what the Supreme Court said, that the exact same action becomes racist because Republicans did it. And obviously have bad motivations, whereas Democrats only have good motivations for the things that they do. And we're seeing this all over the place. I'm fascinated that DACA, you know, this whole thing about it not prosecuting illegal aliens if they brought here as children, was Obama ignoring the law and ignoring the Congress, which never voted for it. He did it all by himself. And then Trump stops doing it. And he's being sued for violating people's civil rights because apparently you have a civil right to have the law that was ignored by your predecessor continue to be ignored. And the basic point is that Trump is an evil Republican and Obama was a good Democrat. So it's just, but this is what we're dealing with now. Is that you know if you're bad, it doesn't matter what you do. It's automatically bad because of who's doing it. So anyhow, the reason this is such a disaster and will never work, I don't care about the cosmic justice concept of white people were bad before and so they have to be punished now, because this is simply bad parenting. If you have two kids and you say to one of them, you've been bad, so I'm going to ignore your wants and needs and interests for the next 100 years, and I'm going to shower everything on your little sister. Okay, we just don't care about you anymore. Is this like a good parenting move? Is this going to create healthy things? Absolutely not. It's going to create resentment. It's going to create ethnic grievances, and it's going to lead us down the same path, which is exactly what we supposedly want to avoid. You cannot tell people that they're being punished for the sins of their ancestors unless you want this to explode into a race war that will go on for the next 1,000 years, which is, I'm afraid, what we're heading for. Treating people equally means treating people equally. And the entire affirmative action regime needs to go because it's the most dangerous thing happening in America today. And as I said, it's everywhere. It's in movies and television. You can't cast black people as the heavy in a movie anymore. If I see like a cop show, okay, and there's like, they're like looking for corruption, I know the black cop didn't do it because you can't have a bad black cop. It's always the white cop. Have you ever seen those commercials for home security systems like ADT Home Security? The guy breaking into your house is white. What percentage of the time in those commercials? 100% of the time. 100%. You think that reflects reality? That 100% of the people who break into houses are always white. They're never Hispanic. They're never black. They're never anything. They're 100% white. This is, again, it's the same kind of affirmative action. It's really, really dangerous. This is, you know, the Nazis used to do this with Jews. What they would do is if a Jew anywhere in Germany committed a crime, it would be in every single paper in Nazi Germany. Every single paper would cover it. And if a non-Jew committed a crime, they just ignore it altogether. So the papers never lied. It was all true. But if you read the paper, you would very quickly get the impression that every single crime was being committed, you know, by Jews, because that's all I ever hear about. Did you know that the exact same week that Ferguson, Missouri shooting happened with the police, that a black state trooper in Texas shot an unarmed white motorist? Same week?
Yep.
Okay. Got no press coverage. I'm impressed that you heard about it, because nobody cares about that. That's not the story we want to talk about. I was looking at news coverage of the looters in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and they were all black. And none of the reporters mentioned them. If you see the footage, you see it. But if you read the story, there's not a word about it. It's an interesting question. Should the reporters have mentioned that the looters were all black? And I actually agree with the reporters in not mentioning it. The usual journalistic ethic is that you don't mention it unless it's relevant to the story. And that's probably a good idea. I don't want to see headlines that say, "Oh, a Mexican guy just, you know, robbed a bank." I want to, you know, I'd rather not have that. But there's one exception, and that is if it's a white person who kills a black person, particularly if the white person is a cop, that will be in the story right off the bat. Before anyone has any evidence of what happened here, that's what you're going to get. Okay, the white cop shot the black kid. That's the first headline out the gate. They would never do it the other way around. And again, this is stoking ethnic grievance. It's ripping our country apart. It needs to stop. And then the final point, the final wrong idea of the left is that this stuff has political solutions. And I strongly disagree. In fact, the evidence is just the opposite. Again, Thomas Sowell makes a really interesting point. He says those ethnic groups that have pursued political objectives in the United States have tended to do the worst economically, and the ones that have ignored politics have tended to do the best economically. It's really interesting. Blacks in the United States have almost always seen politics as the solution to their problems. The Irish also tend to go into politics, and both groups tend to be lower on the spectrum than people of Asian ancestry who tend to do the best economically and avoid politics like the plague. Okay? Asian Americans have never gotten in any significant way into politics at all. They just focus on economics. And guess what? It works. They achieve goals economically where they don't achieve them. In fact, I want to tell you a quick story that really fascinated me because, again, you know, you don't hear as much about this because it breaks down the binary concepts of racism that the left wants to promote. But one of the most discriminated against groups in the history of the United States was the Chinese. The Chinese were horribly, horribly discriminated against throughout the 19th century. I mean, there were laws, you know, basically saying, we'll let in white people, we'll let in black people, but the Chinese, need not apply. And I learned about this in a fascinating story I came across that basically started like this. There are 17,000 McDonald's restaurants in the United States. Huge chain. Do you know what there's more of than that? Do you know what beats McDonald's just going away? It's not a chain, but Chinese restaurants. Wow. There are 30,000 Chinese restaurants in the United States. Wow. Well, how did that happen? Well, back in the 19th century, and it's very important to notice this, our American taste for exotic food is very recent. As recently as the 60s, there were not exotic restaurants as a rule in the United States. You couldn't get Thai food, you couldn't get vegetarian, there was none of that stuff. Okay, you went to a diner, you got a hamburger. There's all of these crazy cuisines are a very recent thing in America. So for most of American history, they were not there, except the Chinese restaurants. They were there. What started the Chinese restaurants? Because Chinese immigrants couldn't get hired by anybody. No one would hire. There were laws against hiring the Chinese. Everyone hated the Chinese, so they said, listen, let's just see if we can do this in our favor. We'll make restaurants with like special food that only we know how to make. And it worked. And it's gone from the mid-19th century. I never had any idea it went this back. Let's go back to the 1850s. Till today is Chinese restaurants all over the United States, and virtually all of them to this day are owned by recent immigrants. How does that work out? Because the recent immigrant, if you're a Chinese immigrant and you run a Chinese restaurant, once you've made enough money so you're okay, you sell it to newer immigrants. And they come in, the new ones come in and buy it, they make some money, and then once they're financially okay and they're ready to enter the mainstream of society, then they sell it to the next group of new immigrants. So they're virtually all owned by recent immigrants, so they keep passing it down the line. And as I said, Chinese people in the United States do better than Americans do. Sorry, it's getting late. Better than white people in America do. They actually do better than the mean. My statement was probably correct. They do better than the American mean. Avoiding politics altogether and focusing on where the real opportunity is, which is capitalism. And frankly, every single attempt that I can see where we try to solve racial issues through politics, which is my final left-wing error, has failed. One of the most obvious examples is Barack Obama. Remember when he was supposed to solve all of our racial problems? How did that one work out for you? Did you know that black Americans lost ground on essentially every single solitary measure of social progress under Barack Obama? It was the worst 8 years in the history of the United States in terms of black Americans losing ground economically, and in terms of college graduation, high school graduation, crime rates, everything went backwards under Barack Obama. You know what was the best year for the best 8 years for black Americans? In what 8 years did black Americans gain the most ground?
Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, that's right. Okay? Nobody wants to talk about that, but that's what the truth is. So these political solutions, kind of like the Rhodesia I talked about before, and it's not just Rhodesia. We just celebrated the 70th anniversary of the independence of India. Okay? And that's very nice. But you know what happened when the British left India?
They killed each other.
A massacre, that's right. Millions. It made the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda look like a cakewalk. Okay? Millions and millions of people were killed in sectarian violence. The fact is, the British kind of had a knack for running things, you know? And I'm here in Boston, this is heresy, I realize. But, you know, the British were really good at kind of keeping the peace everywhere. And the idea that just getting rid of your oppressors politically suddenly solves your problems is supported by no evidence at all. Do you know when India finally started getting their act together as a country? 1991, when they discovered, drumroll please, capitalism! In 1991, the Indians decided to dismantle this whole socialistic apparatus that might micromanage the whole economy and just have freewheeling capitalism a la Margaret Thatcher. And you know what? Their economy's been booming ever since then. It's capitalism that is the tool for successful minorities. So anyhow, so here's my conservative thoughts on racism, my solutions. Number one, rights belong to the individual, not to the group. A society that sees its job as dividing up all of its production by ethnic group is a society that's heading for a race war. When you say, oh, we got to give this much to the blacks and this much to the whites, okay, it is individual rights. Our founding fathers were absolutely right. Rights belong to individuals, not groups. The second is that the culture belongs to everyone. The great thing about culture is just like the Chinese food, you can partake in it anytime you want. And this is very important because there's this idea on the campuses about cultural appropriation. When I was in Oregon this summer, and I had a lovely time in Oregon, but while I was there, there was a tortilla shop in Portland that was forced out of business because it came out that the owners were white.
Yeah.
And how can white people sell tortillas? They were literally mobs attacking their restaurant because white people aren't allowed to sell tortillas, apparently. Okay, you think this is going to lead to racial harmony? Okay, having mob attacks because you're selling, food that belongs to some other ethnic group. Okay, this is not the way to peace. Number 3, peace and freedom come from the people, not the government. Political solutions don't work. The government is a very blunt instrument. It's not a good way to get people along with each other. It's like a hammer, okay? It smashes things. It does not build things up. Okay. Next one is that capitalism is the way to prosperity for every minority group that's ever tried it. Capitalism is great because it allows you to succeed based on what you can do, not on who you are. You don't need anyone's approval. If you've got a better mousetrap, that's all that matters. The next one, and this is important, is that everyone is responsible for their own actions. Nobody is responsible for their ancestors' actions. And it seems so obvious, and yet we're dealing with this all the time. And the reason why is important. It's not that history doesn't matter. Of course history matters. History affects all of us. You can't understand today without understanding history. But if you start playing this game, it's the ethnic grievance game of what ethnic group, screwed over my ethnic group, there is simply no end to the matter. This is going to go on forever. Should the Anglo-Saxon Britons, rise up and throw off the Normans who, conquered them? I mean, there is not a single ethnic group on the planet that at some point hasn't oppressed somebody and been oppressed by somebody else, okay? You want this to stop, it stops with the current generation. It's no fair bringing in ancestries. And then, as I said before, no stats. Because there is no guarantee, as long as people are free, okay, so if you show me a society where people are being prevented from pursuing their own dreams, there I got a problem regardless of who it is. Because that's an incredibly important right, that you're free to pursue your dreams, but we do not look at the statistical results, because the statistical results are never going to be even, ever, ever, ever. They've never have been and they never will be. And then finally, I said I would go back to tribalism, because that was the third kind of racism. There's condescension, where I think I'm just better than you are, which is bad, but not the worst. There's ethnic grievance, which is the worst, because it makes me want to get you, not just think less of you, but hurt you. And then the third kind of racism is tribalism. And I got to tell you, the bad news about tribalism is it's in all of us. It's in the human genetic system to want whoever you perceive as your side to win. It's why there's more Red Sox fans in Boston than in Oregon. When I was in Oregon, I didn't mean any. Okay, but there's a lot in Boston. Did someone persuade the Bostonians that the Red Sox were just a morally superior option? No. It's the home team, and we all love rooting for the home team. It's why when a country goes to war, even a bad war, when a country attacks its neighbors and does bad stuff like that, if they're winning, they'll get popular support because everybody likes to see their country win, even in a bad cause. The anti-war movement didn't really get off the ground in the United States until we started losing in Vietnam. It was the losing, not the moral principle. It was that it wasn't going our way. We love to see our own team win. And so this is potentially dangerous because we will tend, as humans, all of us all the time, to think in terms of our group and want our group to beat the other group. Do you know how we can turn this into not such a bad thing? Patriotism. See, it doesn't have to be an ethnic group. It can be a national group. And what we as Americans, and it's very important because multi-ethnic societies, if you look at the history of the world, have tended to fail because multi-ethnic societies don't work very well, usually. What made America special is that all the different ethnic groups did not worry about their group. They thought of themselves as American. The group doesn't matter. What matters is we're all American. And if you could recapture that, the racial stuff will go away. And the tribalism can be challenged in a much healthier direction. The problem is that the left hates patriotism. And so they're back to encouraging the ethnic grievances that are going in totally the wrong direction. So anyhow, I had some thoughts on sexism. I don't think we have time for them. I'm going to really quickly tell you that I write books and they're kind of cute and fun. And what makes what I do possible, which is to travel the country and talk to groups about these kinds of ideas, is that people support what I do through the books and things like that. Some of you will probably see my first book, The New Democrat, is a parody history of the Obama administration with Reid and Pelosi as Thing 1 and Thing 2. It humorously tells, it's the 5th edition by the way, it tells the whole 8-year story of Obama done as the cabinet, and Salon.com called it the most twisted piece of conservative propaganda print matter out there, which was very touching. I put that on the cover. And then my second book, The Gorax, is a parody of the Lorax, of course. It's my anti-environmentalist parody. It's about how our country is being destroyed by environmentalists for profit, interestingly enough, and it stars Al Gore as the greedy environmentalist. And then my most recent book from last year, I wanted to do something on the 2016 elections called The Wizard of Iz. And it stars Bill Clinton as the wizard. When they first meet him, they say, "Are you the Wizard of Iz?" And he says, "It all depends on your definition of Iz." And Hillary is the Wicked Witch. There's even a cowardly rhino who suspects the Democrats are wrong, but he's too scared to do anything about it. It's actually, this is actually a good book, I think. It starts when Dorothy's house lands on Obama, and she finds herself in the land of the free lunchkins, who have been living off the government for so long they've forgotten how to take care of themselves. And I also, so if you're interested in these, I'd love to get you a signed copy. You know, Christmas is not that far away. Somebody on your list would love one, and you'll be happy, and I'll be happy. It'll be great. And I have the books are $24.95, or you can get all three for $59.95. And checks and credit cards are fine. I also have a couple banned movies, because I told you I was a believer in free speech. Song of the South, lovely Disney movie from 1948, has been banned since 1982 because Jesse Jackson doesn't like it. But it's the song Zippity Doo Dah. It's very nice, and it's not racist, not in any normal sense of the word. And then The Path to 9/11 was a movie made by ABC Television about what led to 9/11. And it's been banned pretty much from the day it came out because Bill Clinton didn't like it. It implies that Bill Clinton didn't do a really good job back in the 90s of protecting us from the terrorists. And so Clinton called up the president of ABC and made him get rid of it. But it's the whole complete uncensored movie, plus another disc, it's a 4-disc set, which is a movie called Blocking the Path to 9/11, which is a documentary about why you can't get the first movie. So it's the whole banned movie, plus a movie about how it got banned. It's a unique set. And then of course there's my seminar, Economic Literacy, on a set of 3 DVDs in case you missed it or would like to relive it. Thank you so much. You want me to take questions? We're out of time.
No, good question.